Welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets with Tim McMaster, Zach Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn.
Can't wait.
Merry Christmas and almost a Happy New Year to everyone. Thanks for checking us out, whether you're streaming or on YouTube or checking out the audio version later. We appreciate you. We're going to take some time later in the episode to thank everyone that's left reviews. Basically, during this holiday season, since back on Black Friday, we kind of put out the word because we appreciate you taking that time to watch the show and do that. So we'll read some of those at the end of the show. Programming, best time of the year to sign up for The Athletic, $1 a month for 12 months. Go to theathletic.com/can't wait to get that great deal. It's Tuesday, Zach, but the Jets won.
Yeah, Victory Tuesday.
Victory Tuesday, exactly. We are going to talk about Woody's comments about the whole regime coming back next year, what that means. We'll get into the game as well, more about the things from the game that matter for the future than actually just winning a game on Christmas Eve that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. We'll look ahead a little bit to the big matchup with Michael Dunn and the Cleveland Browns on Thursday night, and we'll do our picks as well. So lots to get to here on the show. Zach, let's start with Woody talking about Saleh and Douglas. Said, my decision is to keep them. I think we've had some positive moves. The culture of the team is a lot better. The defense is better. The offense, quote, needs a few pieces. Obviously, we expected this to be the decision. Were you surprised at all by the timing, though? I feel like Woody could have made him sweat it a little more than he did by kind of having this conversation with you guys with 3 games left to go and this team playing the way they are.
Yeah, my impression is that it was kind of a concerted effort to get ahead of it because they already were out of the playoffs. And so I think you had this game against Washington, one of the league's worst teams, on Sunday. And if they had lost it, which they almost did, and it would have been an absolute disaster. I think there's something to like getting ahead of it. And so like if that happened, then they still could feel like, all right, well, they're safe still, kind of thing. So ultimately they won that game. And this is kind of the regime that's going to go in the next year. I think the most important figureheads of that obviously are Saleh, Joe Douglas, Nathaniel Hackett. I think we all knew that was obviously coming, as you said, especially once Aaron Rodgers endorsed everybody. I think we knew that was going to be the case. But I didn't expect to get to the stadium on Sunday and then have to deal with like that news. I definitely didn't. I thought maybe it would come towards the end of the year or when Woody talked to the media after the season or all that stuff. But ultimately, I think there's a few parts of this. I think there's one part of, I think it's fair for fans who are, not happy about this news because they haven't really sniffed the playoffs with Robert Saleh or Joe Douglas. And I think that a lot of times this year, including this game against Washington, they've like come out there and it seems like they've been unprepared. They were not able to bounce back from the Rodgers injury in a way that they turned into the worst offense in the league, arguably. I'd say maybe not arguably. I think they might have been the worst offense in the league. And I think that's all worth, that's all understandable criticism. And there's also the side of it of, okay, let's say they fire Robert Saleh. Like, what coach is going to want to take this job where Aaron Rodgers has a very big voice in this? He probably wants to make sure Nathaniel Hackett stays. So, like, okay, hypothetically, you fire Robert Saleh. Like, who are they replacing him with? Who wants to take this job? Maybe there's somebody. I don't know, but it's very possible it's a one and done type situation. So I think everybody has decided it was a mulligan. It was a mulligan year. Next year is the last one. Next year is the last guaranteed year on Rodgers' contract, I believe. So it's kind of like the last hurrah for everybody. And if it goes well, then everybody will get re-upped. And if it goes terribly, everybody will get fired. And that's kind of how it felt like it was going to go this year initially. And then worst case scenario happened, or maybe not worst case scenario. Maybe worst case scenario would have been Rodgers plays and they're bad. Right. Instead, he didn't play and everybody's safe. So I think there's a lot that this staff needs to work on. There's a lot they did not handle very well, both internally and on the field. And the bigger concern for me is the Hackett side of things, just because I think he's kind of shown that he can't, when things fall apart, he cannot handle himself very well. And that's kind of not a good attribute in your play caller. It helps to have Rodgers out there, but I think the biggest difference you're going to see this offseason is they're going to prepare better for the worst case scenario, because it felt as if they just did nothing when the worst case scenario happened and Rodgers gets hurt. So very curious to see how they invest in the quarterback position this offseason, the offensive line, all that stuff we're going to cover ad nauseum for weeks and weeks and weeks after the season's officially over. But yeah, it's surprising, but not surprising. Like the surprising part was when it was announced, not surprising that it's happening. Now the question is, what does Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas do to fix this mess that is kind of here?
So everybody's back, but that doesn't mean necessarily all the roles stay the same, right? I mean, is there a world where they could say, all right, Hackett's back, great, but he's not calling the play? Like, do you think they could realistically do that? We've talked about it. I feel like every one of these podcasts for months now.
Yeah.
Like, he can't be the play caller. And part of the fix there is Aaron Rodgers just changing the play to whatever he wants, which will happen. But you could also just, you can keep Hackett, keep him in an important role as far as he's concerned, where you're not demoting him, but have somebody else making those actual calls on Sunday.
What I would do and what I think they will do are two different things. Obviously, what I would do is, look, I don't think there's any issue with keeping Hackett here. I definitely think he can bring value. I just don't think that value is play calling. So if I had my druthers, I would say push him into a different role, whether it's passing game coordinator or assistant head coach, something like that. And
assistant head coach would be a tremendous failing upwards.
yeah. It's yes, I agree. But then you could bring somebody in. But the issue, the person they need to bring in needs to have the trust of Rodgers. Also, that's why I don't think it's going to happen. Ultimately, I think a name, and I mentioned him in my post-game story, and I've heard him mentioned elsewhere. If the Bears change their staff, their OC Luke Getsy is a guy that was in Green Bay, so he would make a lot of sense to a degree of someone that Rodgers trusts to call plays. But otherwise, I don't think there's anyone that's necessarily out there that I can think of that would make a lot of sense for Rodgers, because he only played for 2 head coaches, I believe, right? Mike McCarthy and Matt LaFleur. So it's not like he went through a lot of different offensive coordinators where he had experience with them, or I guess there was a bunch of different quarterbacks coaches, but Getsy is the one that makes sense to me. But the Bears are playing really well all of a sudden, and they look like a real threat to make the playoffs. And a real threat, there's a lot of talk about how if the Jets and Packers line up in the standings, they'll play each other next year. The Bears are a real threat to mess that plan up, honestly, because I think it seems like the Jets will probably finish in 3rd in the division, but that NFC North is kind of the 2, 3, and 4 spots are pretty close together with the Vikings, Bears, and Packers. So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, I would change the roles around. I don't see that happening, but I do wonder if Saleh brings in, whether it's via getting rid of somebody like Keith Carter or Todd Downing or Rob Calabrese, whatever it is, and bringing in a veteran voice, whether it's someone who has history with Rodgers or not. At a certain point, you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen, but they need to show that they're making a significant change here. And I don't know. I don't know if they're going to. The biggest change is probably going to be personnel wise, getting a receiver and new offensive line and all that stuff. I just don't get the Hackett thing in terms of pure football coaching. I know Roger, we talked about this already, but the whole it's a quarterback friendly offense. It's friendly to him because he gets to run it. I know for a fact that even in training camp, when Hackett would call a play, Rodgers almost, not always, but I would say pretty frequently, he was making his own calls at the line, even in practices. So that's kind of how it goes. And this is what Rodgers wanted. He wanted the power and the freedom to run his show. I know him and LaFleur butted heads at times because he didn't like the kind of offense that LaFleur ran to a degree, a lot of motion. And what Rodgers likes about this offense is it gives the quarterback the power to do things on his own. He gets to go out there, and if he sees something, he can call this, he can call that. He can tell a guy to run around in this direction or just get open, or it can be some backyard football type stuff. Whereas the LaFleur offense and both LaFleurs, I should say, the LaFleur that was here, it's very structured, and you're supposed to, the quarterback is kind of that's why Brock Purdy is so successful, because everything's planned out and all that stuff. So anyway, it's a long way of saying I don't see a change at offensive coordinator coming, even if there should be one.
Yeah, we'll keep talking about that, I'm sure. And that's going to be a storyline, into training camp and everything as you see this offense kind of develop with Rodgers back and all of that. All right, let's get into the game a little bit. Obviously, great start, 17 points in the first quarter, the most points in a first quarter by the New York Jets in almost 10 years, since 2014. They were up 27-7 at the half. Breece Hall was great. Garrett was great early in the first half. Then the wheels come off a little bit, but Zerline saves the day late. To stick with the offense, I guess, they're up 27-7, Zach, and you'd think they would just feed the run game in the second half and just shorten the game. Gives you a chance to not just, feature Breece Hall, who did get 20 carries in this game for 95 yards, but give Izzy some more carries, right? Like we got a little dose of Izzy, but he could have gotten even more runs if you're pounding the ball in the second half behind an offensive line that looked a little better this week. But instead, Trevor Siemian ends up throwing 49 passes in this game. Was this was it almost like Hackett going overboard with the letting it rip thing, even when, at some point you got to be smart and you have a big lead? I know they haven't had a big lead. It's something new, but here's your chance to actually be conservative because it's maybe the right thing.
Yeah, I think there was, you kind of feel it kind of felt like Hackett was like, "Ooh, everything's working, so I'm just going to keep pedal to the metal."
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep trying. And I think that was the wrong choice, clearly, like that, especially with how good Breece was. Like that was like vintage Breece Hall. Izzy was making some plays. Dalvin Cook didn't even get a carry, by the way. But yeah, it didn't really make much sense to me in the second half where they were not running the ball very much. I do think while it was great that they finished these drives with touchdowns in the first half, I think it is important to note that I think at least the first three and maybe the first four drives started in Washington territory, and including one that started at like the 8-yard line. So they weren't long drives, which is a better sign of like good play calling, I think. But they finished those drives out. Breece and Garrett had a big role in the first half. Garrett didn't have a target in the second half until the fourth quarter, which he did finish with like 14 targets or something like. I think it was 15 targets.
Yeah, 9 catches for 76 yards and a lot of yak yards in there too.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing that they hadn't been doing this season, getting these guys the ball and letting them have the opportunity to make plays in space. I mean, Breece Hall had 16 targets, which is an astronomical amount for a running back. And I saw Rich Cimini tweet, I think he's like 5th in the NFL in receptions over the last, I forget what the week range was. I think like 5 weeks. He's in like the top 5 because we talked about earlier in the year, like, why are they not throwing the ball more? You're seeing what he can do with that. Yeah, this was just a true Breece Hall domination game against a bad defense, admittedly, but signs of optimism. But again, against a bad team, they did not hold it down well. They had 14 penalties for 150 yards. Like 150 yards of penalties is insane. At one point early in the season, they were pretty low in the rankings for penalties, and it's been so bad over the last 8 weeks that they're third or second. They were third going into Sunday. They might have jumped because of how many penalties they had. They've been the second or third most penalized team in the NFL, which is not a good sign of discipline. Offensive line was better. Trevor Siemian was getting rid of the ball quickly. Bad opponent, meaningless game, ugly football, but a win's a win. It did feel like the kind of game the Jets normally lose. Like they blew that lead. The kicker lines up. They're like, well, obviously the Jets kicker is going to miss this field goal. But Greg Zuerlein is like the anti-Jet in a lot of ways, where he just does his job every week consistently. Like he's just been an absolute stud as a kicker, and he's hitting free agency. I'm very curious to see what they do about it. I wrote that it wouldn't surprise me if they gave him like a Cairo Santos type contract. I don't know if they want to give out a long-term deal to a kicker, but
he's not a young kicker either.
Yeah, he's not young. You can't let him go. You can't let Morstead go. Like the fans would riot if you lose the first two good kicker and punter that you had at the same time in a long, long time. So Greg Zuerlein, their MVP of that game, absolutely.
But questionable for Thursday, right?
Yeah.
What happened?
Jets luck, I guess.
Yeah. What
came out of the game with a quad injury, is what Saleh said.
On the
I think he said he's not going to. He's either limited or not going to. Yeah. We didn't get the specifics on that, honestly. And he probably wouldn't have given them. But sorry, I have a little cold right now. The season has worn me down. But I would say that I think they said they're going to see how it goes today, which is, a lot of times in Saleh speak probably means it's not good. But if they sign a kicker today or tomorrow, then that might not be a great sign for Greg on Thursday. You don't want to risk further injury to arguably your best players. We'll see what happens there. But they had that guy, Austin Seibert, that they signed earlier the year that maybe he can come back. But yeah, I mean, this is a game against the Browns that we're going to talk about obviously in a little bit. Joe Flacco's been going off, but I do think the Jets defense can stop their offense. So it will be like a grimy type game. That'll probably be won on a field goal. So ideally you have Greg there if you want to win.
The Browns showed on Sunday that you actually don't need a kicker to win in the NFL.
Oh,
Dustin
good point.
Hopkins
Yeah.
didn't play, and they just started going for two and making it happen. And granted, they're playing a bad team. Well, bad team because of they're missing star quarterback. But yeah, that was fascinating to see them. No other options. Sometimes you see the punter give it a go as the place kicker when the kicker goes down, but the Browns just said, we're just going to go for two every time and see how that plays out. I mentioned the O-line being better. It's a low bar to clear considering how they were the week before. But when you're looking for bright spots, Joe Tippmann was solid again. Yeah.
He didn't give up any pressures. The O-line overall was pretty solid, especially in the running game. I think Lake and Tomlinson struggled a bit. I still think Mackay has had a hard time lately. I'm curious to see what his free agent market is. But yeah, I mean, Joe Tippmann's a positive. And this experience for both him and Carter Warren, those are the two guys that are getting the most valuable experience over these last couple of games, because especially this week for Carter Warren when he has to go against Myles Garrett a bit. Both him and Mackay will probably see him. And I fear for Trevor Siemian's life in that regard. But yeah, I mean, the offensive line is the biggest problem area on this team, and the fact that you can at least say that you have a center that you're able to build around, like that's an important position to lock in. And a lot of the best teams have a center for a long time, especially because it's so important position for the relationship with the quarterback and calling out the protections and stuff like that. So this is valuable experience for him, and I think he's done. I don't think he's been as like amazing as maybe people are interpreting his performances. Like he hasn't given up pressures, which is very good. I think he has a lot of work to do, but I think he's progressed throughout the season and he's become a very solid center.
Which for a rookie is what I think that's what you want, right? You don't expect the guy drafted when he was drafted. He wasn't like a top 10 pick to step in and do what he's doing. The defense, it's funny. There was a lot of highlights from the defense and what they did with Sam Howell, 6 of 22, 56 yards, 2 picks. Obviously they dominated the first half, but then they allowed Jacoby Brissett to move the ball on them. And the interception by Siemian was a killer, because I feel like if they get in on that drive when they're inside the red zone in the third quarter, that really puts the game away. And instead, Siemian throws the interception. They get out of that territory, they go down and score, and suddenly the momentum swings. But the defense didn't exactly slam the door in the second half. It just feels like they're getting tired.
Yeah. I definitely think there's something to that. They are a little banged up at some spots too. But yeah, I think this is kind of how it goes when the season the wheels come off a little bit. But I still think this is a great defense, and I'm curious to see how they come out to play on Thursday, especially on a short week, because the Browns have been obviously firing all cylinders offensively. Amari Cooper's been absolutely dominant. Joe Flacco of old. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of how these last few weeks, it seems like the defense is kind of worn down a little bit. But Thursday's going to be a real test, because I think the Browns are stoppable, but they haven't been very stoppable lately. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, let's go into it a little more. And Flacco, we've talked about it, that the flaw, right, is his immobility. Yeah. Although they got him out of the pocket a couple times on Sunday and he made some big throws. Old Joe Flacco, right? He's always been able to throw a great deep ball. He threw some of those, and Amari Cooper, you mentioned, on fire, and he's been the big benefactor of those late throws, those big throws. You have this Jets defensive front and pass rushers that have been, although they only had 1 sack on Sunday, it's been dominant all season long. And you have a Browns offensive line that, while injured, is still really good. Yeah. And it's really going to be interesting to see how that plays. Do you think that's the key to this game? I mean, you talk about lines often being the key to the game, but Jets defensive front against this injured but still good Browns offensive line.
I think the bigger key is the Browns D line versus the Jets O line, frankly.
That just
But,
feels like it's. We
yeah.
know how it's gonna
Yeah,
go. Though.
exactly. Yeah,
I guess that's my point. Is like when it's Jets D against Browns.
So if you just assume that's going to be a loss,
right.
Then you look at the other side. Yeah, I mean, that's like you said. Like, if anybody knows how Joe Flacco plays, it's this group. But on the flip side, like Joe Flacco has pretty good knowledge of like what works against the Jets defense, and that's like quick throws. That's the targeting the slot, getting the ball to the running back, the tight end. They have a really great tight end in David Njoku, who's had a really, really good year, and he's huge. So that's a mismatch for their linebackers and safeties and stuff. But yeah, I think that's going to be interesting. I'm very curious to see how Joe plays this game. I mean, the Jets have pretty much shut down just about every quarterback other than you have Dak Prescott in week 2 and Josh Allen in the Bills rematch. Like, they've done great against every other quarterback. So you'd think they'd be able to stop Joe Flacco, but it's very interesting because they haven't really gone against a quarterback in recent years, especially since this defense was solid, like that knows the defense as well as Flacco does. So I'm very curious to see how much of an advantage that is. There is the Elijah Moore part of it too. Mm-hmm. He's going to be highly motivated, obviously, kind of shoving in the Jets' face. Amari Cooper is the bigger problem, and if they keep him away from Sauce, that's worked lately when the other teams do that. But I still believe in DJ Reed personally, so I still don't think they'll travel or anything like that. But yeah, it's Jets defense versus Brown offense is going to be a fun one. It would be even more fun if like Nick Chubb was still playing, but even without him, like the Browns offense is capable of like going off.
Elijah Moore came up today at Saleh's press conference, asked about him and what went wrong with him with the Jets, and he said that's a story for another day. Zach, is that how he dodged that question?
Yeah, I think that was the phrasing. He said probably a conversation for another day. I don't really know why it's another day considering he's not on the team anymore, but I mean, ultimately, I don't think it's that hard to figure out. I don't think the Jets found him to be particularly mature, and I think he kind of like showed that in the way he acted in multiple scenarios. Talent-wise, I don't think anybody questions his talent. He hasn't really put it together still on the field. I don't think he's been as great. Like, there's flashes of it, and so it blows up on Twitter sometimes around Jets Twitter. But ultimately, like, it has to count as a loss on the ledger for Joe Douglas because you gave up on a second-round pick, basically just to get more ammo for the Rodgers trade. And what they replaced him with has been worse than him, no matter what you believed in Elijah Moore last year. McCole Hardman obviously didn't last year. Alan Lazard's been an absolute disaster. Corey Davis retired. Randall Cobb's been terrible. So they've all been worse than what he brought to the table, but still ultimately, like, he's a guy that I don't think they viewed as a culture fit ultimately. So they moved on. And I don't think it's that hard to figure out, even if Saleh doesn't want to say it publicly. So I get it, but it's unfortunate because we saw his talent, obviously, especially that rookie year, because he had that stretch before he got hurt where he was absolutely dominating for like that 5-week stretch. And he always was a training camp star, as he was in Cleveland, because the Browns, right? Zach Jackson, I remember messaging me during training camp, and then the season came, and it's like, okay, so he's a training camp star. Yeah, that's kind of how it goes. But yeah, it will be interesting to see him play because he's a very like wired, emotional dude. So I know he's going to be highly motivated for this game, and I'm curious what his even quotes will be this week. I'm sure he's talking today.
And I'm sure that's why Saleh dodged it. Not, by another time, you probably have the conversation next week, but not 2 days before the game, and doesn't want to give him any extra motivation.
Yeah.
By the way, 54 catches, 579, and 1 touchdown this year for Elijah Moore. That's 55th in the league in receptions, 59th in yards, and 145th in obviously touchdowns with just the 1. So, I mean, not bad, but not what the glimpses that you do see show that you think he could be. Obviously, the Browns have gone through 4 quarterbacks, and there's been issues like that. And he is he's not the number 1 option, maybe not the number 2 option, considering how well, you mentioned the other guys besides Amari Cooper are playing. Anything else from Browns and Jets coming up Thursday? Do you know where you're getting brunch with Marissa yet?
I haven't talked to her yet. Hopefully I feel better by then, because I don't want to get her sick, because I don't want to get, I don't want to get Michael out of that. Michael Dunn is the one thing we haven't covered yet.
Or Madison.
Yeah. Or more importantly, Madison. I am excited to see Michael Dunn. I hope he gets some snaps, and Maybe he gets to spike a ball again after a touchdown. This is the Michael Dunn game. I can't worry about how he plays in the actual football game, if we're being honest. But yeah, hopefully I get to see Marissa. I am frankly tired of going to Cleveland every year. It'd be nice if we didn't have to do that anymore. It seems like we should be safe for next year because I think the Jets are lined up with that division as well for a road game. I'm not sure who they're lined up. Who's in third? The Steelers probably. Steelers or Bengals, I would say, are probably third in that division right now.
I would imagine it'll end up being the Bengals the way they're playing now, but the Browns have kind of separated themselves as number 2.
Yeah, the Browns are pretty clearly second in that division. The Ravens obviously already clinched it. So maybe I'll avoid. I might have to go to Ohio, but at least it won't be Cleveland. No disrespect. I don't know. I'm doubting nobody.
Although I'm kind of tell you, Zach, when rating Ohio cities, I put Cleveland ahead of Cincinnati.
Oh, I haven't been to Cincinnati, so that's why I wouldn't know. I have been to Akron and I've been to Canton, and I do not recommend anybody ever go to those.
I mean, there's Skyline Chili. It's disgusting. Cincinnati post, but
I have a friend that's from Cincinnati, is like a diehard Bengals fan. And so if I do wind up going there, he'll be offended if I don't like the chili. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, so I'm not thrilled to be going. Like, the Jets seem to be in Ohio every freaking year. Last year's game was fun just because the ending was insane. Joe Flacco to Garrett Wilson combo. But yeah, the game itself doesn't matter all that much. But I am very curious to see how the Jets look in this game because they didn't look very good in the second half of that Washington game.
Taylor Delgado asking, is Dunn slated to start on Thursday? No.
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't think he
because I think they're getting healthier on the O-line. So
right, they're starting to come back.
He'll be active though. Yeah.
He's in short yardage a lot, goal line, and obviously he plays a lot of special teams as well. So 68 will be on the field. We're pretty sure of that. But yeah, I don't think he will be starting along the offensive line this week, unfortunately. Yeah. For fans of this podcast and us. All right. Should we do picks first or best of reviews? Let's do picks, and then we'll do the reviews at the end. Things are getting tight. This is the pick segment brought to you by BetMGM. We appreciate all the lines that we get from BetMGM and them presenting this segment. Jimbo Brennan has jumped into the lead. He wasn't even in the top 2. He jumps up and grabs the lead with 118 total points. New Nijmegen Jets was, I think, second before. He's still there. KM Kazaz was first. He drops to second. You got a 4-way tie for second. So things are tight. What we have to figure out, Zach, too, is this thing going to end at the end of the regular season, or are we going to play it through to the Super Bowl?
That's a good question. We got to decide that. We could keep playing it through, I feel like.
We've always done that in the past, but that's when we've been more involved.
Yeah, true.
But it would give us more time to come out with our great winner's reward too.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's lean towards that, but we'll discuss it over the next week or two.
Yeah. But Jimbo Brennan, in the lead as we head into week 17. All right, let's take a look at this week's games.
Some good ones.
Yeah, not bad. Jets obviously leading things off against the Browns. I took the Jets. I think they lose, but something tells me this game's really low scoring.
Yeah, I had the Jets plus 7.5 as well. That's a pretty big line.
Yeah.
Although you never know. I mean, like I said, Myles Garrett might murder Trevor Siemian, so we'll see how that goes.
Then it may still be a close game. Who knows?
Yeah.
Detroit Dallas is one of the great ones on the schedule. Saturday
pretty big
night.
line.
For that one, yeah, and I took Detroit because of the line.
Me too.
6.5. Even though it's at Dallas, Dallas has shown some cracks in the armor. So, then we got, let's see, Buffalo 12.5 over New England. That's a big spread, but I feel like that's just going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Bears. That's an interesting game for them to get to 7-9 against Atlanta.
The Bears being favored by that much, though, over anybody seems a little high. So I think I went with Atlanta for that one. But Vegas Colts is an interesting one because the Raiders coming off the Chiefs game, they're kind of sneakily in the playoff race. The Colts are currently controlling their own destiny. I said Raiders plus 3.5, but I could see the Colts covering, honestly.
Yeah, I did Raiders too, just because it feels like they're just hot and going to stay in this thing.
Yeah.
And then the other, I think at the end of the week, there's Cincinnati, Kansas City. That has become interesting. as the Bengals kind of hang in there. And obviously that's big for the Browns too. This is a chance if the Browns beat the Jets and Kansas City is able to beat the Bengals to really separate themselves. So that one's interesting. And then the last one there, Packers Vikings is an elimination game.
Yeah.
Loser of that one's done. Probably winner's done too, but winner stays alive. So not the great games we had this past weekend, but some good ones on the docket for sure. You said you're taking the Jets?
Yeah, I'm taking the Jets. Brian Serbic just pointed out might murder Trevor Siemian again. I forgot that the Browns knocked Trevor Siemian out in 2019 in his start.
Yeah, this is kind of a revenge game for him to get to go back against the Browns as a member of the Jets all these years later. Yeah, for sure. Yep. Taylor says Marissa first assignment after maternity is to figure out the winner's award. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, she has a lot of work on her plate for us.
All right. So we're going to end this thing by reading through some of the reviews, which may be really boring for people, but we appreciate everybody that listens to this show. And some people took the time to put some thoughtful comments on Apple. So we're going to zip through them really quick here to say thank you to everybody out there who did it. This was over the last month, basically. So here's some good ones we'll fly through. It hurts so good from Tom in, I assume that's supposed to be New York. If you're interested in podcasting about the Jets, that is produced and co-hosted by 3 devout non-Jets fans. That's us. Boy, is this podcast for you, but for real, this is probably my favorite Jets podcast. Thank you, Tom, for that. And yes, we don't hide it. We are not Jets fans, but I will say that I generally root for the Jets every single week because of the podcast. We want to cover a winning team for
winning
sure.
Podcasts are better.
That's right. Chris, this one titled Chris Streveler from Big Richard Nick. Love the pod, love Strev, miss Marissa. Keep up the good work. That one's short and sweet. Thanks for that. Here's a long one from Panko Industries. Being a Jets fan is the ultimate soul-crushing grind. The highs are fleeting and new lows lurk around every corner, often brandishing well-worn brass knuckles. We are perpetually stuck in a Sisyphean loop. So, where can one find a respite from this dour existence? Look no further than the Can't Wait podcast with affable host Tim McMaster, sidekick Marissa Dunn, and kind of goofy Jets best beat reporter Zach Rosenblatt.
That's the nicest thing somebody's written about me.
Yeah. With a clear understanding of, in all likelihood, this will not end well for the Jets. The Can't Wait crew shares insights and analysis on New York's other football team. Rosenblatt's access as the athletic reporter saddled with daily gangrene coverage gives listeners all the up-to-the-minute content they desire, and Tim and Marissa keep the show up-tempo enough so listeners aren't wallowing in jet-induced despair for too long.
That should have my job. That was well written.
Yeah, thank you, Panko Industries. Some short ones here. Jab 53827. Tim and Zach have a great dynamic. There you go, Zach. And I really enjoy listening to these. As a Jets fan, definitely a breath of fresh air to watch these episodes. Thank you, Jab. The Rossman says, besides Zach's mumbling and sometimes his audio being much lower than Tim's, that's probably because Marissa's not here. It's great. Zach also seems very excited about his girlfriend. So good for him. Excited for Marissa to come back. No golf talk is a big win for the listeners. More Connor hate. We love all the Connor hate. Tim's a great host. Thank you, Rossman. Up next, this one from Andrew Min, longtime listener. I listen in the Athletic app. Now, this is going the extra mile. Listens ad-free in the app, which we appreciate, but downloaded the Apple Podcast app just to add this 5-star review.
That's very
always
sweet.
Great and original content and analysis. Thank you, Andrew, for that. Chris Witz says, I have a few Jets pods that I listen to regularly and Can't Wait as a critical component. They don't get into the X's and O's too much. Does anybody really want to hear about the X's and O's? I don't know as much, but always keep up to date with all the major stories. Zach is very plugged in on the behind the scenes information, and it's very entertaining and a fun listen overall.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Julie Claire Lee, 64, says, love this podcast. This podcast has a great mix of thoughtful analysis and fun banter. As a Jets fan who is in disbelief about what is happening this season, but also not too surprised, it is nice to hear other people feel the same way. The Jets caused me to feel frustration, but I signed up for that as a fan. Hearing reporters voice similar fan frustration about the team while also remaining objective and fair is refreshing. Hey, that's what we're going for. Thank you,
Yeah,
Julia.
thank you.
The Jets might not win the Super Bowl this year or ever, but this podcast is, in my mind, world champions of sports
Aw.
podcasting. The one highlight of the last 2 years of my Jets fandom was discovering this lovely podcast. Thank you,
That's sweet.
Julia. All right, a couple more. This one from Rschles, Rschles. Listening to this pod is consistently more enjoyable than actually watching or listening to the Jets.
That's nice.
And finally, I saved the longest for last. This is a book here from Joseph. Joseph says, being a Jets fan has really made me question God's existence. Why would an all-knowing, all-loving deity let something so awful like the Jets offense exist? But do you know what makes me believe there is a God? This podcast. I know that after I spend 3.5 on the couch watching the worst offense in history take the field, I'll get the best recap one could get by listening to Can't Wait. Zach is an excellent writer, and his wisdom is on display when discussing all things Jets. New York beat writers are known for being over the top, but Zach is always fair in his assessments. Tim, what can I say about Tim? I love the sound of his calming voice while my inner dialogue screams about the Jets' decisions over the years. Last but not least, I can only assume Marissa is going to be great when she gets back from maternity leave. Go Jets, go Zach, go Tim, and go taking care of those babies. Awesome.
That was good. That was great. Thanks, guys. Those were great.
Yeah, excellent reviews. Thank you. We should make this a yearly tradition.
Yeah, I like it.
What we'll do is I'll start keeping track from this point on.
Yeah, so all year.
Now, we'll do the best. We won't read them all. Hopefully there's hundreds, so we won't read them all, but we'll clip aside the best ones. So thank you everybody for taking the time to do that. We appreciate everybody out there. Hope that your holidays have been great. Zach, any last thoughts before you head to Cleveland tomorrow?
Yeah,
there's no better place to spend. Well, you know what you should do on this trip. You're not going to have time, but this is the best time to go to the Christmas Story house.
I've gone to the house before.
Actually. Oh, you've gone there. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
It's probably packed now, though. I went in October. Walked right in, had the house.
It is pretty cool. It is pretty cool for sure. Yeah. I'll just say Merry Christmas. I'm not sure if we're going to get another one before the New Year, so Happy New Year. It's been a trying season, obviously, but we appreciate everybody who still comes in to listen and join us on these live shows. Looking forward to next year. We'll have a lot to talk about in the offseason, which is where we thrive, obviously, as Jets writers and Jets fans. That's our Super Bowl, as everybody always says. So I hope you guys will jump back. Maybe we'll get Dane Brugler on pretty soon.
It's almost Dane time.
We'll try and get some guests a lot this offseason. We'll get Marissa back pretty soon. I think will she be there for our first pod after the New Year?
She may be. She's back working. I don't know if we had ease her into podcasting. Dude.
Okay,
so
yes, potentially the return of Marissa. We'll talk about this Browns game and look ahead to the end of the season. And then we'll be in off-season mode, and that's that's where we thrive. So thank you guys. We love all of you, even the mean ones. I love your meanness gives me fuel to keep going. So, but thank you guys for listening to all our stuff and hating Connor along with us.
All right. We'll talk to everybody again next week.